Susan Glaspell's play Trifles depicts the troubling end of a troubled marriage. Neighbors and law enforcement search through the cold and lonely house of Mr. and Mrs. Wright as they investigate the murder of Mr. Wright. The chief suspect in everyone's mind, his wife, Minnie. Yet there is little evidence to suggest what her motive for killing him may have been. Throughout the course of the play, we are made aware of the loneliness and isolation suffered by Mrs. Wright, a monotonous life that leads her to crave any form of companionship, which she eventually finds in a small bird. Silence can be golden. When self-imposed, isolation can be calming and allow for reflection. But the terrible silence and loneliness felt by Minnie Wright was not self-imposed. It was enforced upon her by her ironically named husband. While we have little evidence to suggest that he was physically abusive, we cannot ignore the psychological effects Mrs. Wright must have incurred as a result of her isolation. Effects which undoubtedly led to rising feelings of anger and resentment toward her husband. Eventually, the killing of her bird, her only true companion and the only thing that could break the silence of her day-to-day life, pushed her over the edge and into madness. A similar theme, silence and isolation leading to madness, can be found in Charlotte Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. The woman in Gilman's story is confined, more or less against her will, and at the hands of her husband John. She is kept in a single room lined with yellow wallpaper, where she is discouraged from any intellectual activity, such as reading or writing. With nothing else to do but sleep and stare at the walls, the woman eventually begins to see a pattern emerge from the wallpaper. As time goes on, the pattern becomes clearer and clearer until she is eventually convinced that there is a woman trapped behind the paper. By the end of the story, the woman has gone completely insane. She believes she was living behind the wallpaper and has escaped into the room. With a hidden rope and some secret plan, the story ends rather vaguely, with her husband fainted by the door and her crawling about the border of the room over and over and over. The similarities between the two works are numerous, and the differences reflective of each writer's stylistic choice. Glaspell focuses on the end result, the very clear murder of Mr. Wright, while Gilman describes the insidious transition of a normal woman into insanity. At the end of the day, it is up for debate whether Mrs. Wright's actions were the result of temporary insanity or just exaggerated revenge. Similarly, it can be argued if the woman in the yellow wallpaper even really killed her husband, or if he simply did faint at the sight of his wife crawling in a circle about the room. No matter how you interpret the events and descriptions in either work, it is clear that they are both addressing the treatment of women, specifically the isolation of women and their reactions to being isolated.